good morning to you. It is 3 days to go to payday, and it's the 27th of March. And if you've joined us, you are on the fifth connection where we broadcast every weekday morning, every work weekday morning. And we try our best to keep it as consistent as possible time wise. We are busy in the book of Hebrews, which was written to Christian Hebrews by a Hebrew that they no longer remain Hebrews because they stood in great danger of defection, great danger of falling away, falling back. And so the book is about how stick-to-itiveness steers believers to maturity and not stagnation. So the challenge across the book is press on, don't fall away, because what you need is to understand that it's all about trusting Christ. This morning I've entitled this section of the text in verse 10, verse 1 to verse 4, a seasonal bargaining chip. Because these 4 verses talk about how that the old order, the law, and its stipulations, all 613 of them, they are the old order. They are the old bargaining chip. We've got a new bargaining chip because the old one is a seasonal one. What we need is a perennial bargaining chip. And that bargaining chip is a person, found in a person, none other than the risen Lord Jesus. It takes me back a number of years ago when Game, which is a chain store in our own city, ran an ad, and it said the following: win a year's supply of nappies with Game. So for 1 year, if you won that particular competition, you'd have a year's supply of a whole host of things. Well, nappies with a year's supply, but you'd win a cot, you'd win a bouncer, you would win a car seat, a pram, and about 15,000 rands worth of nappies, throwaways. For new modern mothers, that's the biggie. For older mothers, they washed every single nappy by hand. But you see, that was a bargaining chip that was a seasonal one. It ran for a long, long time, a longer time. But it was still only for a year. It ran out after a year. When you look at the Old Testament, you see the high priest going in once a year, annually, to, in a sense, gain that bargaining chip for 1 year. The sins of the people would be covered, right? It would be purged, is the word. The word in the original text is kapiru, coming from an Akkadian cognate, kapuru, which has this idea of purging, purgation. Decontamination was the idea. And so this morning we're going to look at these 4 unfolding verses. And I've entitled this section, A Bargaining Chip for All Seasons, because that's what the chapter is about. The first 4 verses talks about the seasonal bargaining chip, not the perennial one. Because the point here is that personal voluntary sacrifices produces a chip to bargain with the future. That bargain chip is decisive, it is effective, because its dealings are based upon the sacrifice of another. That sacrifice is Jesus. And so the question behind this section of the text in these 4 verses is, how do we bargain with the future? Well, we can't bargain with the future on the basis of an old chip. The law can't cut it. Watch what the text says. The text says, for since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. It's an outdated bargaining chip, and it is useless when dealing with the future because it defaults to obsolescence. It defaults to the factory setting. The machine crashes out, if you will. And these 4 verses sync with verse 8 to verse 18 of the same chapter, because Christ's death was the full and final act that ceases animal sacrifices. He's the new bargaining chip. In digital language, it would be like saying, I've got a new patch that fixes the old bugs. It exterminates them, and now the machine can run freely. So the movement across this chapter is from the seasonal to the effectual to the royal. A seasonal bargaining chip, an effective or effectual bargaining chip, and then the royal bargaining chips, the mother of all bargaining chips, is, of course, Christ. So the movement and the flow of the story is like that, from the seasonal to the effectual to the royal. Let's continue in these 4 verses, because in verse 1, it's very simply stated. The old bargaining chip is outdated. It's now just a signifier, and it's not the thing. It signifies, it points to something, but that pointer is not the thing. It's like my finger pointing in the direction of the sun or pointing to the sun. My finger is not the sun. It's but a pointer to the sun. The sun is the thing. A finger is a signifier. The old order, the sacrifices pointed to something new and fresh. But the old was the outdated thing. The law cannot decisively purge. It could only cover for a time until the new comes. Until the one who is Christ in you, Colossians 1:27. Christ in you is the hope of glory. The focus and the locus of authority shifts. It's right inside of you. Hebrews 8 verse 5 continues that idea. These sacrifices, they serve as a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. They are the skia, not the substance. They are the shadow, not the substance. Christ is the substance. And so the law is a reminder of sins. It's like the old Commodore 64 computer. I had one. And that old system could only do what it was designed to do. It could not do what a MacBook Air, a laptop MacBook Air can do. The old order is gone. The new order has come. And so in verse 2 and verse 3, watch what it says. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to offer these Old Testament sacrifices, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have a consciousness of sins? But they had a consciousness of sin. The old order could not cleanse the internal. Only the outward, real and physical, could it decontaminate, because the tent was God's sacred space. It was his dwelling place among his people, Israel. But in these sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year. Not a removal, but a reminder of sins, because sins were covered until the ultimate sacrifice would come. Jesus, who would say, it stands finished for time and eternity. What stands finished? No more sacrifices, no more animal blood of bulls and goats can atone for sin, can appease our hostility before God. Because we need to be reconciled to God. The hostility is on our end. What is finished? The sacrificial system is finished. Obsolete. Onto a factory setting. It's ineffectual because Christ has done it all. That's what is finished. It's the animal sacrifices. And so we need to bear in mind that the personal voluntary sacrifice of Christ himself is what produces a chip to bargain with the future, because it is decisive and effective, since its dealings are based upon a superior sacrifice of another. And that's where transcendence meets immanence. That's where heaven touches earth. Jesus on a cross, appeasing our hostility towards God. Now, verse 4 is what clinches the deal. The old software is useless when the upgrade comes. Christ is the upgrade. The old has expired. And so you see in verse number 4, the outdated bargaining chip had built-in parameters for operations. It's the way software does on a computer. Can't deal with the new stuff that comes at it. Can only deal according to the old order, the old way of operating. Verse 4. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats. It's the blood of bulls and goats. They are animals. Animal sacrifices. Bulls, Tauron, as in the name Tyron, as in Taurus the bull, the zodiac sign. Tauron Kai Tragon. The blood of bulls and goats can't cut it to take away sins, could only cover. And so the old order is what cannot suffice any longer, because it's based upon old ways of doing things. Blood of bulls and goats. Now the new order, the new patch, as it were, cleanses from sin and cleanses the conscience, a consciousness of sins. It's internal, it's effectual. Because you see, a system cannot suffice. It is something that is organic and alive and fresh and real. And his name is Jesus. No animal sacrifice could do what he does or what he did. And so this morning, are you stuck inside of an ism, inside of a system? Isms are like that. They are systems. Systems work very well for machines. But systems have antics, as in the text that was written many years ago entitled System Antics. They have antics, and they work well for machines, but not well for human beings. A system is a machine you can switch off tonight. Tomorrow morning you switch it back on. You can't do that with a human being. How do you switch a human being off and switch them back on? No system can do that. We are alive. We are human. What does it mean to be human? To have God's signature written across my life. I'm an image bearer. And so as believers, we need to be careful, because we get stuck in ideologies. What is an ideology? An idolatry of ideas that traps me inside a way of thinking, and I can't think outside of the box. Systems are like that. Isms are like that. Isms inside of the church and isms outside of church do that. The assembly can be trapped and captivated by an ism, such as Arminianism, Calvinism. They are systems of thinking. A Bible believer views the scriptures as that which orients him or her to reality. These Christian Hebrews were stuck inside of old ways of thinking, and they wanted to go back to Egypt, as it were, the old way. Are you stuck in an old way of thinking? Or have you allowed a system to captivate your mind? Well, for one system inside of the believing community called Calvinism, I think you could easily give about in excess of 300 reasons, 336 to be exact, reasons for why that ism is wrong-headed. Now, some would die for this ism. But the last time I checked, Jesus died for every ism. Isms can't cut it. It will not suffice. It can't do the trick. And so what are the indicators that show that you're captivated by an ism? It's when you cannot think clearly. You can't think well, but you've become an avatar of a system, a systemic way of thinking instead of an organic way of thinking. We are followers of the way. We are on a journey of discovering truth and the joys of discovering what God has, because Jesus is the true and living way. How can you arm yourself this morning with a perennial bargaining chip for the future or with the future? I'll get to know this way, which is Christ. That's what the writer was presenting, Jesus as the true and living way, the one who opened up this portal for new thinking, for fresh kinds of living in a world that was crashing in on the life of these believers. I trust that the word has been a challenge to you this morning, puncturing a hole in the ceiling of your thinking so that you can start to think better and think well. I trust that you will have a good day. Go with God. Goodbye for now.